And as Anna said, today we're going to talk about our 3 CCs, project, program, and portfolio management, particularly in light of the changes in the digital age which we now find ourselves in. So what I hope we'll cover today, or what I hope you'll learn from today, quickly an introduction to the 3 Ps and where they sit within the framework. We'll look at in a little bit more depth at each one of the critical capabilities, just showing you some of the core concepts and how we might answer some of today's challenges, again in light of those digital changes. We'll look at the assessment process. Will we actually use these critical capabilities in the real world? And then we'll wrap that up with a question and answer session. As Anna said, if you do have questions, of course, just put them into the chat window and we'll be happy to address those at the end. If we were to look at the 3 Ps, well, here's the structure that we see. We've got project management, program management, and project portfolio management. Now, the reason that we've decided to do an introduction to all of them simultaneously is that there is a high degree of interdependency among the 3 critical capabilities. It doesn't mean you have to take all 3 at once or engage in a project to try and lift all 3 simultaneously. But you can take any combination thereof. You can take 1, 2, or 3 of them, depending on your current needs and what's important and critical for you in your organization at the moment. And where do they fall within the framework itself? Well, program management and project management fall within the managing the IT capability, macro capability. And project portfolio management falls under managing IT for business value, under that macro capability, which is exactly where you would expect these critical capabilities to appear. It is about managing IT capability within the organization, and it is about driving value back to the business. Now, Anna briefly mentioned that we're going through a process, an uplift process across a lot of critical capabilities at the moment. And at a very high level, I want to touch on some of the drivers for that as to why we're doing it. And the first of which, as the title slide might have alluded to, is the idea that digital is impacting on every aspect of IT. It's changing everything in terms of IT and how we approach it and what we expect from it. Now, combined with that, we already were dealing with a scenario where the role of a good IT project manager was very hard to fill. Good project managers are hard to find and worth their weight in gold. That has only become harder, and it has become a more difficult role to fill because the nature of IT projects itself is changing. We're going from large-scale monolithic projects, smaller, faster, iterative projects, which are designed to take place within an agile environment. The net outcome of lots of little small projects will be to lift the overall business. Now, added to that complexity, added to that change is the fact that the boundaries between IT and business are becoming blurred. We all know that the journey for IT is to move from being a back office support function to becoming something more intrinsic to the business, and that is happening, but what that means is that project management must take into account both sides of the house, both business and IT. And if we look at other things like the program manager, well, how do you be an effective program manager in this age of cloud and shadow IT, where any aspect of the business can spin up a virtual IT infrastructure with nothing more than a credit card? Again, how do we manage that in light of digital transformation? And probably the most important aspect of all is, well, how do organizations translate their strategic objectives into some sort of portfolio of projects that can be run, that can be carried out, and that can be used to the betterment of the business? And that is generally where most organizations are falling down, an ability to translate strategic objectives into a manageable portfolio project. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a look at each one of the critical capabilities and hopefully illustrate how we can identify and meet some of the trends that I've just discussed. So if we start with project management, and again I should say, as Alan mentioned, if you do want to deep dive into these in a little bit more detail on a smaller group or a one-to-one session, then absolutely we can arrange that and do a follow-up call or webinar session. So as I mentioned, we're going through the critical capabilities, and I talked about them at a very high level, and now I want to talk about them at a more individual level. what are the drivers for change in project management? And as I said, the nature of IT projects is changing. We're moving from large-scale, massive projects to smaller-scale projects. Additionally, the number and nature of options for project managers is changing. Different methodologies, different frameworks, different approaches, different ways of doing things. That's combining to form an uncertain landscape for project managers. There are no right answers anymore. There are certainly wrong answers, but it's very difficult for project managers to be able to navigate within this landscape. And we're hoping that the framework will provide them with guideposts on this journey. We also want to take into account that our project manager is having to deal with an increasing informational load. They straddle the line between business and IT. There are all of these different approaches and methodologies to be taken into account. There are all of the different types of projects. We have to give some type of structure in this environment for a project manager to be effective. And if we are going to move to smaller, more iterative projects, then the repetition of success becomes critical, because now we're doing project after project after project, not a single large project with a bit of a gap. We need to be able to ensure that we know how we were successful and bring that in to all future projects. So if those are the drivers for change, then what do we hope that the project management critical capability can achieve? Well, first we define it. We define project management as the capability to assign resources to initiate, plan, execute, monitor, control, and close projects that can deliver objectives that a business can leverage. And the objectives beneath that then, I'll not go through all of them, but ranging from establishing a governance structure to initiate, control, and close projects, which seems pretty self-evident, but as we have seen from our clients and our partner clients, isn't happening. Moving through to developing the necessary competencies of individuals, something often overlooked by organizations, for closing off the fostering a learning environment. Critical, again, not something being looked at or considered by most organizations. To support those objectives, we've built the project management critical capability. Some of you might be familiar with the structure of it. As you know, we have the critical capability, and the level beneath that, further granularity, are what we call categories. In this case, within project management, we have two categories. We have initiating, planning, executing, and closing, and we have monitoring and controlling projects. It's not just enough to say, I want to get better at project management. Project management is made up of different facets. And within those two categories, we have what are known as critical capability building blocks. And again, I know some of you are familiar with it, but for those of you that are not, these are further areas of granularity, particular areas of function within project management that any organization needs to focus on and engage in a journey of capability improvement. I'll not go through all of them, again, for the sake of brevity, but let's just select those green critical capability building blocks, which fall under the initiating and closing category. If we look at the very first critical capability building block, project initiation management, and we look at that last one, project closure management, and we see the entire journey there that needs to go through for project management. All of the different areas that the framework will focus on. And if we're going to look at the different facets of project management, then we need to be able to assign a maturity level to it so that we can say, okay, well, this is where you're at and this is where we'd like to get to. And we do that at multiple levels. What you're seeing at the moment are the capability or the maturity levels for project management as a whole. The overall maturity steps that we want organizations to go through. And if we were to have a look across we've done about 700 assessments in total across all of our clients and partner clients. Most organizations are coming in at around a level 1, a level 2, which is inconsistent project management practices or very basic project management practices. And ideally what we want to do is we want to get clients to a level 4, where we're seeing advanced project management approaches using advanced tools and even degrees of automation. And from level 4, then we can build a platform to reach that top level, that level 5. Now, in order to do that, then we've got to bring together some sort of journey for you, some sort of phased approach, a step-by-step approach to improve your maturity. And we tie those last two slides together by saying that each one of the critical capability building blocks has their own maturity level. And within those maturity levels, we have a series of steps that can be undertaken to improve maturity. And we call these our practices, our outcomes, and our metrics. And I won't go through everything that's on the screen here, but I'm going to pick one critical capability building block to focus on. And in this case, it's project closure management. Now, if we have a look at a level 2 practice there, use checklists and scope of deliverables audits to confirm that all of the project work is completed. It's not very advanced. That's not groundbreaking stuff. But most organizations are not even doing that. But if we were to have a look at a level 4 practice to illustrate the maturity and the evolution we want to take you on, now we're on ensure retrospective project reviews are structured and identify learning at all completed project stages. We're moving from just ticking the box to make sure everything is done to building in some sort of pattern that ensures we're always analyzing our capability so that we can build that into future capability. And again, if we look at the evolution of the metrics from level 2 to level 4, number and percentage of projects with disputed scope of deliverables becomes project learning metrics for individuals, teams, and the organization at each life cycle stage. These are the journeys that we want to bring you on. And by focusing on multiple different critical capability building blocks, we will raise the overall maturity and ability of project management within the organization. So I'm going to move on to program management. And as I said, guys, we're just doing a very thin slice off the top here. And we'll rattle through each of these to give you a taste of what the form and function of each critical capability is. The structure remains the same, guys. If we look at program management, what are the drivers here? Again, our old friend digital comes back into play. Digital transformation will involve multiple projects. Project management methodology alone may not be enough to see those changes through. We've also got to take into account that in today's age, change is going to come from within the organization, and it's going to come from without the organization. And what that means is that the gatekeepers to technology in an organization, those people that assess and figure out what new technologies we're going to focus on, they have to be exposed to all sorts of new lines of communication. They have to accept that some of these good ideas might come from people within the organization, but they might come from partners, from customers, even from competitors. And they've got to be able to figure out how to use that information for the betterment of the organization. And how do we define program management? Well, we define it as the ability to assemble and assign resources to identify, select, approve, oversee, deliver value of program coordinated components. What objectives do we want to pull from that? Again, establishing that governance model, something that most organizations are not currently doing. Tracking the progress and expected impact of components within the program. Too often we've seen large IT projects fail because of a lack of tracking and monitoring. Approving and terminating program components in accordance with the governance model. Similarly, we've seen too many projects rattle on well past the point where they could have delivered any feasible value, should have been terminated long before then. Looking at the structure of the critical capability within program management, in this case we have 3 categories: program governance, policies and controls, program initiation, program oversight and control. And sitting beneath that, we have approximately 10 critical capability building blocks. Again, without going through all of them, program governance is one, program benefits definition, and program lessons learned. Pick 3 at random. Again, 5 levels of maturity, and once again, in line with all of our critical capabilities, most organizations are coming in at a level 1, a level 2, where program management is either an aggregator and reporting function, or they're using very basic tools and methodologies to get this done. Again, we want to drive to a level 4 maturity. And here, this is the ideal that we can aim for at the moment. Programs are clearly defined, they're well managed, they're effectively controlled, and they deliver the stated benefit. And even some of the aspects of it can be automated. And from there, we build a platform to see whether we can get to level 5 maturity, which is always that top line where we're going into continuous improvement. And once again, to do that, we've built a series of steps, of practices, of outcomes and metrics to support that. Each critical capability is somewhere in the region between 30 and 60 different practices, depending on which critical capability it is. You may not decide to work on all of them, but you'll certainly pick the ones that are relevant to you and where your organization and your team is at right now. And what type of evolution have we got here? Well, we're looking at the critical capability of program governance in this case. And if we look at a level 2 practice, use governance policies and controls from previous similar programs. Again, not exactly earth-shattering stuff. Not a lot of organizations are even building that level of repetition in. By the time we get to level 4, though, look at what that evolution becomes. We're getting down to the approval cycles and tailoring them, ensuring that we've got alternative signatures in place in order to remove bottleneck points. It's pretty advanced stuff that a lot of organizations are not currently involved in. And if we look at outcomes in this case, well, a level 2 outcome is a set of governance criteria can be put in place quickly. Again, that's quite basic. But by the time we get to level 4, we're looking at fewer approval cycle delays and a more agile and flexible approval regime is evident. And we're moving from the time taken to agree program structures and decision rights and approval processes, which, as we know, is often a huge consumption of time in organizations. Delaying projects is simply getting the meetings in place to say, well, who owns what and when. By the time we get to level 4, we're looking at the cycle times on approvals. That's where we want to get people to get them away from the build stage to the actual execution stage. And now I want to move on to the final critical capability, which is project portfolio management. Again, what are our drivers here? Digital transformation, once again. It's not going to be possible to just we see it in the marketplace where the board might go, make me digital, as if there's a single thing that an organization can do to become digital. There are a lot of different projects that are going to be involved in that. A lot of different areas that need to be focused. Once again, we have to take into account that the input, the digital enablers, are going to come from internal and external sources. And what we're going to say is, well, the rate of change in IT means that regardless of where a good idea is coming from, you have to be able to onboard that. You have to be able to put it into a program or a portfolio of projects. And you have to ensure that that good idea is going to be actioned. The failure to action good ideas might mean the difference between success and failure in today's rapidly changing environment. So how do we define project portfolio management? It's the ability to select, approve, and balance project portfolio components to deliver the organization's strategic objectives and operational needs. And the objectives we see for this are alignment with strategic objectives. Again, we don't often see IT in alignment with the strategic objectives of the business. We know that everybody knows what the goals are, but whether they're in alignment is a different matter. Operational effectiveness, managing people, leadership, and resources. And how does the structure of the CC support that? Once again, we have 3 categories: portfolio processes definition, portfolio strategy alignment, and portfolio oversight and control. And once again, we have the critical capability building blocks which support that. And here we have 12 of them. And as always, we have our maturity level. There's no surprises here. Level 1, level 2 is pretty much the standard maturity across our benchmark at the moment. Project portfolio management is an aggregator function. And we want to drive you, our clients, or members, or our partners' clients to level 4. Advanced processes and procedures for PPM are followed. And to do that, we will once again provide the guideposts, the steps, the guide in order to become more mature, more capable project portfolio management. In this case, we're looking at strategic objective breakdown method. Then we have a look at a level 2 practice there. Identify steps or progressions to simplify the transition of the business from its current mode of operation to its desired mode of operation. Again, pretty self-evident. Not a lot of organizations are undertaking this at a strategic level. By the time we get to level 4, what are we looking at? Developing methods to sequence and schedule tasks based on dependencies and knowledge acquisition criteria. And if we look at the metrics, once again, a level 2 metric is very much just looking at the costs of it. how much of the percentage of portfolio cost accounted for by the management. But by the time we get to level 4, we're looking at, well, the number of emergency consultants hired to fix capability and knowledge gaps in project delivery, with the goal being to drive that to 0, or as close to 0 as is physically possible. So what I've done there, guys, is I've taken you on a very whirlwind tour through 3 critical capabilities, which, Eileen and Conor have spent a lot of time developing. There's a tremendous amount of research and knowledge in there, and we probably haven't done them justice with giving them 5 minutes each. But to give you a taste of what's capable, and what we want to see is we want to see our members engage in journeys using those 3 critical capabilities. Now, to support any journey, we're going to have to assess where you're at and where you'd like to be. For those of you unfamiliar with our assessment process, it's very simple. It's between a 4 and a 6-week process. It involves a survey where your individual users within your organizations, both business and IT, will try and assess their current maturity and their target maturity, and we'll develop a plan to improve that. And to give you an idea of what that looks like, what you're seeing at the moment, for example, is a screenshot of a question within the project initiation management critical capability building block in project management, that critical capability. And what clients are asked to do is, well, they're presented with 5 value statements, and they're presented with a don't know option. And what we want users to do is, well, we want to say, based on these maturity levels, which one feels like it's closest to your current maturity? And then we say to them, where would you like to be within the next 6 to 12 months? Now, that's a reasonable time frame. 1 to 3 months. We'll definitely see improvement at the critical capability building block level. We can engage in new practices and we can get better. But in order to affect a maturity uplift, to go from one level to another, we really need to be building in a 6 to 12 month time frame. And that means we have to be realistic. What level of maturity do we want to achieve in the next 6 to 12 months? Along the bottom of the question, you'll see 5 gray stars. We also ask the user to say, well, how important is this? If they're aiming for a level 5 maturity, but they're only giving it a 1-star importance rating, well then, you've got to figure out how important is that. Are we really going to engage in a massive transformation for something we don't think is important? And we'll pull all of that together and create a workbook. I'm only going to show you one tiny slice of it right now, which is really used to try and plot themes within the organization, to try and figure out how do all of these critical capability building blocks come together. And here we see this was a mid-sized public sector body who had done an assessment in project management. And a number of themes came out of that. The first, this one, using the capability building blocks A1 and A10, which is project initiation management and project closure management. This organization had problems both starting assessment or starting projects and ending projects. We see another trend here in A3 and A5, which is governance and communication. Control of the project as well as communication both to project team members and the people outside of the project team was very basic. It was difficult to understand who was in control and what was happening within these projects. And a final theme here that we've selected, A4 and B1, resourcing and performance management. Concerns over the number of consultants being brought in and how they were being used. There are other trends there as well, but these were the trends that the clients said were most important and an area that they wanted to focus on first. By engaging and using the practices, the outcomes, and the metrics, they've started their journey. They've started to improve, or they've started their capability improvement journey. And by engaging on these 3 separate projects, these 3 separate themes, they'll begin to lift their overall maturity project management. So that, guys, I've given you a very quick run-through of the 3 critical capabilities. I just want to quickly outline any next steps. If you do want more information, please go to www.ivi.ie, and that will have all of the information on our framework, our assessments, and our latest changes to our critical capabilities. If you'd like to join our community, please go to LinkedIn and type in IVI Global Community and join it there, and then you'll get regular updates, regular articles, and regular invites to help understand what is coming up. In the top right-hand corner are some contact details for Anna, myself, and for Mark, who would be our Customer Success Manager. And beneath that then are our upcoming webinars. And we're going to be running introduction to ITCMF, which is something we run semi-regularly, which is just an overview of how it works on the 27th and 29th of March. And on Tuesday and Thursday, the 10th and 12th of April, we will be doing an introduction to information management. And RSM has left me.
Acronyms are wrong there. It's Risk Management RM and ISM Information Security Management on the 10th and 12th.
Okay, very good. And with that, I'm going to pass this back over to Anna.